In this video, I'll be going over the reporting features in Keypoint Interactive. If you've been following along in the playlist, then you may recognize this presentation as one from the Participant Groups tutorial. I've also imported the custom fields from the rosters video, so be sure to take a look at those videos if you haven't seen them yet. Remember, all of the data is stored right inside the PowerPoint document. That means that as long as you save the file, you can always come back later and add more charts to the slideshow or export the reports we'll be discussing. I've already simulated some voting data, so let's get right to the topic at hand by clicking on the Reports button on the Keypoint tab. This is the basic list of reports that are available. You may see some additional reports depending on your licensing. You can click on each report to see a sample of what that report type looks like. There's an attendance report, which lists everyone from the roster and shows how many questions they've responded to. The graphical summary shows the question text and highlights the correct answer. It also shows the raw counts and the percentages of audience selections. There's an optional bar chart of those results right in the Excel document. Now notice, if I click to select this report, I see some additional options appear. A couple are grayed out because they don't apply to the questions in this presentation, but this is where I can select whether or not to include the bar charts in this report. Next up is the group comparison report. This one is essentially the same as the graphical summary, except that it breaks down the data by groups. There's a Select Groups button, which allows you to specify which participant groups to include in the report. So in our case, we might want to export one version comparing hourly and salaried workers, and then run it again to break the data down by region. There's also two special groups that Keypoint can create on the fly to include in your comparisons. One showing all of the participants in the presentation, and another showing participants that never got assigned to any group. Speaking of groups, the Group Data Report outputs an Excel document that has each group's voting on its own worksheet. The Individual Report saves a Word document that essentially contains a series of graded exams. It shows the student name and score, and then highlights right and wrong answers. This may be a good time to bring up the Select Questions button. By default, Keypoint selects all of the questions in the presentation for the reporting. However, this works exactly like it does for charts. You can go in and select the exact questions you want to include in the report, and this would even have the extra tabs here to filter by objectives if this presentation had any. There's a link to the video on objectives down below in the description if you're not already familiar with how they work. The Individual Data Report is basically the raw data in Excel format. Each row is a participant, and each column is a question. How they voted is in the cell where they meet. The overall summary and the response detail are both Word documents that grab stills from the presentation and summarize the voting. Response detail also adds the individual responses. Points scoring and simple participant scoring list the participants along with their points or their percentage correct, respectively. Summary data lists the question text and then breaks down the voting into columns for the whole audience along with every team and group in the presentation. And finally, the scoring summary. This report lists attendees and questions in a grid with green checks and red X's indicating whether they got each question right or wrong. This report also allows you to specify a cut score here in Keypoint so that it can calculate pass-fail. But that cell on the spreadsheet is also active, so you can change the cut score there and Excel will update the pass-fail status on the fly. I've selected the graphical summary and the scoring summary reports. Clicking the Create Reports button prompts me to choose a location for the files. As Keypoint was creating the reports, it noticed that some of the questions don't have right answers. It's just letting me know that those won't be included in the scoring summary grid because it can't mark them right or wrong. Okay, let's look at the graphical summary report that got created. Notice that it did highlight the right answer for the question that had one. And how about the scoring summary? Not very exciting because the report only has one question, but you get the idea. Back over to Keypoint, here's a pro tip. The exports behave a little differently when you only export one at a time, as opposed to two or more like we just did. I'm going to select only the individual data report this time. When I click Create Reports, it allows me to specify a folder and a file name for the report. Then, it allows me to choose which information I want to include from the roster. This is important because it allows me to include the employee ID and whether they're hourly or salaried along with their names. Remember, those were those custom fields that we created by importing the roster at the end of that tutorial. Looking at the report, you can see that it contains those additional columns along with how each participant responded to every question. Okay, that's enough for this video. Remember, Keypoint stores your data in the PowerPoint document, so the presentation itself can be a report if you save it as a PDF. You can also export the Word and Excel documents we just went over. And you could even import that individual responses report into a database like Access if you needed to create some additional reporting. Don't forget to check out the other videos in this tutorial series, and be sure to let us know if you have any questions. Thank you for watching.